Hi there, everyone, and welcome to the Daily Gardener, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling. It's July 29th. Today, we remember the botanist who jumped in a birch bark canoe with Aaron Greeley and then paddled to Mackinac Island 110 years ago today. We'll also learn about the woman who was a housewife until the age of 48, and then she transformed into one of Australia's leading naturalists. And we'll celebrate the artist who died today among his canvases of sunflowers. We'll also hear the letter Beatrix Potter wrote about her garden on this day in 1924. And we'll honor the life of a marvelous landscape designer who died in a fire on this day already 4 years ago. He once said, "I've had a wild life." Today we'll hear some fun poems about tomatoes. I'm really looking forward to sharing those with you. And then we grow that garden library with a book about shrub and hedge plants. It's an excellent resource for gardeners who are looking to define borders and also add practical, healthy, and low-maintenance beauty to their property. Great idea. And then we'll wrap things up with a botanist who shared his disdain for the honeysuckle. But first, let's catch up on some greetings from gardeners from around the world and today's curated news. Well, first up is a happy birthday wish from Claudia in Nebraska to her husband, Mike. He's been gardening for over 30 years. It's been his weekend passion. And she writes, "I never have to worry about deer season or fishing season, but I do have a beautiful year-round garden." And then she shared pictures of their garden, and it's absolutely beautiful. So happy birthday. And here's to many more years in the garden. And then next is a post from JC in Pennsylvania, who wants to wish her grandson a happy 4th birthday. And then she shared pictures of him helping her in the garden last summer. And of course, like so many grandparents, JC has not been able to see her grandson in quite some time. And that always tugs at my heartstrings. But I always smile when I hear stories about gardening, connecting people across the generations. It really is a unifying and bonding activity. So, JC, happy birthday to your grandson, and I hope that you get to see him again very soon. All right, now if you'd like to participate in the Gardener Greetings segment, just send your garden pictures or stories, birthday wishes, and so forth to me, Jennifer, at thedailygardener.org. That's Jennifer at thedailygardener.org. And don't forget that you can listen to the show while you're at home. Just ask Alexa or Google to play the Daily Gardener podcast. It's just that easy. Here's today's curated news. First up is a post from Claire Coleman that appeared in The Guardian. Claire is one of my favorite gardening journalists. And she wrote a post a while back called "Why Front Gardens Matter." And I absolutely loved it. So I've been meaning to share it with you guys for some time. So I'm glad that today's the day. Anyway, here's an excerpt from Claire's wonderful article. Last month, Charlotte Harris, one half of the landscape design duo Harris Bug, decided to dig up her paved front garden in East London. Charlotte said, "It was a discussion we'd been having for quite a while. Around here, every bit of green space feels precious. And obviously, there are parks, but I think each of us has to take responsibility for any space we have." Well, amen to that. And then Claire points out that where Charlotte lives, about half of the yards have no plants, but then the ones that do have plants provide moments of joy. One garden has a beautiful magnolia. Another garden has a vegetable patch with frames and climbing squash. And it was that garden that was the inspiration to Charlotte. And she said, "It's a gift, isn't it? It's the ultimate in gardening altruism, because your back garden is for you to enjoy, but your front garden is about improving everyone's experience." And then Claire points out that the front garden has gained a powerful new significance for all of us. It's now a point of contact with friends or family delivering supplies, or just catching up with a neighbor that you've hardly spoken to before. I know for myself up here at the cabin, I actually added some seating in the front because I'm constantly talking to one neighbor or another, and I figure might as well get comfortable. Anyway, so Claire's point is excellent. Now, in this article, Claire has many more points about making the front garden more meaningful. And if you'd like to read this post in detail for yourself, all you have to do is the next time you're in the Facebook community for the show, just search for the word front, and this post will pop up. All right, I've been saying for a while now that prune time follows bloom time, and that's definitely the case with iris. And you should begin to train yourself that once you see a bloom, you should put that plant on a mental list that it will probably require some action on your part as a follow-up when it's done blooming. So now when your irises have finished blooming, and most of them probably have by now, it's the perfect time to cut off the dead flower stalks. But don't cut the leaves of your irises. Why is that? Well, that's because irises use those leaves, those sword-like leaves, to nourish the rhizomes for the following year. It's very similar to daffodils. You've got to let those flowers die back, let that green material slowly turn yellow and shrivel up, because that's what's going to give you a beautiful new plant next year. And if you'd cut the entire thing down, you're really hurting that perennial's ability to come back with any vigor. In fact, you might damage it and it may not come back at all. So definitely leave those sword-like leaves alone, no pun intended. The other thing for you to consider when it comes to iris is that right now they go into a semi-dormant stage. So it's the perfect time to divide them. You don't need to wait until late in the fall to do that. Now, iris like to ride the surface of the earth, so digging them up should not be a problem. And when you plant them, you definitely don't want to plant them like a traditional plant. What I like to do is dig a shallow space for them, lay the rhizome in that little grave, and then use some lawn stakes to stake them up so that they stand up. So my rhizomes don't get covered with dirt. And I like to make sure that the top of the rhizome can see the sun. Now, after you've moved them to their new location, the piece de resistance is giving them a little haircut. Now, you don't have to do this. It's a personal preference thing, but I like to do it as the last finishing touch with my iris. So what you do is you cut the leaves on a diagonal, kind of creating that fan shape that you've probably seen in pictures or maybe in somebody else's garden. And then that's it. You're done. You've done your iris care for the year, and you'll have more beautiful iris next year, God willing. Okay, so here's the blog post that I wrote for you today. It's called "A Peter Rabbit Garden is a Lovely Idea." Now, I timed this post to coincide with the fact that today I'm sharing a little letter that Beatrix Potter wrote to a young gardener on this day back in 1924. And a Peter Rabbit garden used to be something that most gardeners were familiar with, but we've kind of lost that practice over time. So I wanted to tell you about it today. So here's a little refresher. Peter Rabbit is the creation of Beatrix Potter, and she was a noted botanist and mycologist. And a mycologist is just someone who studies fungi. Now, to make your Peter Rabbit garden, we're going to draw inspiration from Beatrix Potter's garden, which was located at Hilltop Farm. Now, these are some of the elements that you'll want to include. First, you might want to consider adding a little wooden fence or a stone wall around the perimeter. That'll just help define your space. And it also is a very strong tie to Beatrix's garden. Now, once you have this little space defined, you're going to fill the garden with the herbs and perennials that were featured in her books. Beatrix loved herbs, and her garden included herbs like mint, chamomile, lavender, parsley, sage, thyme, rosemary, lemon balm, and tansy. Then next, you can incorporate some of the edibles that were featured in her books. Of course, lettuce would have been popular with Peter, then beets, radish, rhubarb, onions, and strawberry. And then finally, don't forget your ornamentals for color and beauty. Beatrix wrote about pansies, roses, and pinks. And there you have it, a little Peter Rabbit garden. Now, if you'd like to read my original blog post for yourself, all you need to do is search for the word Potter in the Facebook group for the show, and this post will pop up. All right, that's it for today's gardening news. Now, if you'd like to check out any of my curated news articles and original blog posts for yourself, you're in luck, because I share all of it with the listener community in the free Facebook group for the show, the Daily Gardener Community. So there's no need to take notes or search for links. The next time you're on Facebook, just search for Daily Gardener Community and request to join. I'd love to meet you in the group. Here's today's brevities. On this day in 1810, a 24-year-old botanist named Thomas Nuttal jumped in a birch bark canoe with Aaron Greeley, the deputy surveyor of the Territory of Michigan, and together they paddled to Mackinac Island, arriving 2 weeks later on August 12th. Thomas spent several days on Mackinac. He was actually the first real botanist to explore the flora of Michigan, and indeed of Mackinac Island. Thomas immediately set about collecting and writing detailed accounts of the flora he discovered. Now, he documented about 60 species, and about 20 of those were previously unknown. One of the brand new Mackinac discoveries was the dwarf lake iris, which became the state wildflower of Michigan. Little fun fact. And today is the birthday of the Australian naturalist and prolific writer Edith Coleman, who was born on this day in 1874. Until recently, little was known about Edith, but the author Danielle Claude wrote a book about her called The Wasp and the Orchid, which explored how Edith went from being a housewife until the age of 48 and then pivoted into one of Australia's leading naturalists. Edith had a special appreciation for orchids. Beginning in January of 1927, one of Edith's daughters told her that she'd seen a wasp backing up into the flower of the small-tongue orchid. The odd behavior was something both Edith and her daughter would repeatedly see over the next few seasons, and it perplexed them, especially after Edith dissected the plants and discovered that they were male. Edith continued to study the wasp behavior, and she finally figured out that the wasp was fertilizing the orchid. Turns out the orchid uses this stealth pollination strategy called pseudocopulation to trick the male wasps into thinking they're meeting with a female. By getting the males to enter the plant gets pollinated. And for her work, Edith became the first woman to be awarded the Australian Natural History Medallion. Edith will forever be remembered for her groundbreaking discovery about orchid pollination. And today is the anniversary of the death of the artist Vincent van Gogh, who died on this day in 1890. Vincent had tried to commit suicide by shooting himself in the stomach, but he managed to get back to his home, and he lived for an additional 2 days before dying beside a stack of his sunflower canvases. In March of 1987, Vincent's painting titled Vase with 15 Sunflowers was sold by Sotheby's in London for almost $40 million. And that was more than 3 times the highest price ever paid at the time for a painting at auction. And it was on this day in 1924 that Beatrix Potter wrote to a little girl named Dulcie and described her garden. She wrote that her garden had a box hedge around the flower bed, and moss roses and pansies, black currants and strawberries and peas, and big sage bushes and onions, which always do badly. And she wrote, I have tall white bellflowers I am fond of. They are just going over. Next there will be phlox, and last are the Michaelmas daisies and chrysanthemums. Then soon after Christmas we'll have snowdrops. They grow wild and come up all over the garden and the orchard, and some in the woods. And finally, it's the anniversary of the death of the landscape designer extraordinaire, Ryan Gainey, who died on this day in 2016. Hard to believe it's been 4 years already. Ryan died trying to save his 2 beloved Jack Russell Terriers, Jellybean Leo and Baby Ruth, from a fire at his home. Sadly, neither he nor his dogs survived. When it came to landscape design, Ryan was entirely self-taught. And there's a beautiful documentary about Ryan's life called The Well-Placed Weed, The Bountiful Life of Ryan Gainey. And I shared it in the Facebook group of the show, so check it out if you get a chance. In the documentary, Ryan asked the filmmaker, I've had a wild life. Do you know why? Well, his reply was simple, and it was 100% Gainey. He simply said, I created it. Ryan purchased a home in Decatur, Georgia, that used to be the site of Holcomb Nursery. And I thought he did something very genius. He removed many of the greenhouses behind his home, but he kept the low brick walls that had served as the foundation for the greenhouses. The result was that Ryan had instantly created a series of garden rooms that he could decorate and design to his heart's content. Throughout his career, Ryan became friends with notable designers and gardeners like Penelope Hobhouse and Rosemary Veary. He loved Rosemary. They had a special bond. And he also loved the Camellia japonica. Ryan's gardens looked effortless, with things spilling over and nestled in a way that made them look like they'd been in the garden for decades. It was Ryan who said, "Where lies the genius of man? It's the ability to control nature, but for one purpose only, and that is to create beauty." 148 days before Ryan passed away, an enormous white oak fell over and crushed his house. Ryan considered the tree to be the soul of his life. In Unearthed Words, today we celebrate the tomato, and I have 2 fabulous poems for you. The first one is by Pablo Neruda, the Chilean poet and Nobel Prize winner, and his poem was translated by Margaret Sayers Peden. It's called Ode to Tomatoes. The street filled with tomatoes, midday summer, light is halved like a tomato. Its juice runs through the streets. In December, unabated, the tomato invades the kitchen. It enters at lunchtime, takes its ease on countertops, among glasses, butter dishes, blue salt cellars. It sheds its own light, benign majesty. Unfortunately, we must murder it. The knife sinks into living flesh, red viscera, a cool sun, profound, inexhaustible, populates the salads of Chile happily. It is wed to the clear onion, and to celebrate the union, we pour oil, essential child of the olive, onto its halved hemispheres. Pepper adds its fragrance, salt its magnetism. It is the wedding of the day. Parsley hoists its flag. Potatoes bubble vigorously. The aroma of the roast knocks at the door. It's time. Come on. And on the table, at the midpoint of summer, the tomato, star of earth, recurrent and fertile star, displays its convolutions, its canals, its remarkable amplitude and abundance. No pit, no husk, no leaves or thorns. The tomato offers its gift of fiery color and cool completeness. And then here's this wonderful poem by the poet Janice Northerns, and it's called Good Tomato. I stumbled on Janice's poem and I immediately loved it. And I tracked her down on Twitter and then got her permission to share this with you on the show today. And I think you're going to love it. Janice was inspired to write Good Tomato after reflecting on the fact that tomato was a popular slang term for a woman between the 1930s and the 1950s. The poem came together after she incorporated the many fascinating gendered names of tomato varieties like Beauty Queen, Sugar Plum, and Better Boy. Now, if you're reading the poem, you'll notice that some of the terms are italicized, and those designate all the names of the tomato varieties that are woven into Janice's poem. What a great idea for a tomato poem. Anyway, here's Good Tomato by Janice Northerns. She took the purity pledge. Sweet baby girl, super snow white, Arctic rose, fled the grasp of beef boy and better boy on a southern night, and baptized in hydroponics, gleamed waxy and vapid under a fluorescent gaze. She was a good girl, beauty queen, gumdrop, mighty sweet, sugar plum, pink champagne. A tidbit on the tip, flaming burst, solar flare, razzle-dazzle Roman candle of his tongue. Lucky tiger, top gun, tough boy, sun king. She was plum, pear, grape, and cherry, because one thing is always like another, like a wad of chewed-up gum, tasteless and shriveled on the marriage vine, and gave it away too soon. She was a Jezebel, shady lady, spitfire, perfect flame, hot to the touch, steeped in dark earth, sun-soaked, bright tang, bursting in the throat. A little dirt on the tongue never hurt anyone. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, Shrubs and Hedges by Eva Monheim. This book came out in March of this year, and the subtitle is Discover, Grow, and Care for the World's Most Popular Plants. The Washington Gardener said this book is clear enough for beginners and detailed enough for pros. Ruth Rogers Clausen wrote that shrubs and hedges are often taken for granted by professional horticulturists and garden owners alike. However, this invaluable book celebrates them with readable and fascinating details about a range of species suitable for individual locations. Eva's passion and experience shine through the text. Detailed information is included for each cultivar, hybrid, and/or selection, its suitability for specific sites, sound growing and pruning tips, and its place in ecological landscapes, along with tool care, reference material, and more. And undoubtedly, Shrubs and Hedges will become a significant reference book for years to come. Now, I have to point out that Eva Monheim is a pro. She's the co-founder of Verdant Earth Educators, a horticultural education and consulting firm. And she's an instructor at the world-famous Longwood Gardens, and she's also a faculty member at the Barnes Arboretum of St. Joseph University, where she teaches landscape management. Eva's book is 224 pages of shrub and hedge plants. It's a great resource for gardeners looking to define borders, a great first step for gardeners who are just creating their gardens. And Eva's book will also help you realize that shrub and hedge plants are practical, they're healthy, and they offer low-maintenance beauty. So that's a great trifecta. Now, you can get a copy of Shrubs and Hedges by Eva Monheim and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $23. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. On this day in 1951, the botanist Charles Clement Deem replied to an inquiry about the honeysuckle. Charles wrote, "That plant's name is to me the same as a red flag to a bull. I cannot tell you in words how I regard this vine. Your question is, does it propagate from seed? I do not believe it does, but I've never heard a good word for it. All I can say affirmatively is that it's no good for anything." And before Charles finished writing his censure of the honeysuckle, he twice suggested that some new insecticides might kill it. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener, and remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced in lovely Wyoming, Minnesota with the help of Paige Mance, Brooke Bierbaum, Kiana Rayleigh, Maddie Doyle, Natalie Decker, and Eric Begay. You can find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media. You can follow the show on Instagram, and listeners always have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for the show. Just search for Daily Gardener Community the next time you're on Facebook and request to join. All the stories and books that are featured on the show can be found over at thedailygardener.org, thedailygardener.org. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for my free Friday newsletter. Last but not least, you can share your own gardener greetings on the show by emailing me at jennifer@thedailygardener.org. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and as always, have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow.